Okay, we are, as we move through the various sacrifices that are listed amongst the positive commandments, the Mitzvot essay, we have number 76, Ein Vav. That is, that he commanded us that any woman after childbirth offer a sacrifice, and that is a 1-year-old lamb as a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove as a sin offering. But if she was poor, she should offer 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, or for one for a sin offering and one for a burnt offering. And she is also lacking atonement until she sacrificed them. As he said, on the completion of her period of purification for either son or daughter, she shall bring a 1-year-old lamb for a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering. Hey, Estelle.
Hi, Estelle. So it's a kapara also. It's
right,
called a
but
kapara.
here there's something. Here, the thing that adds another layer is she's actually offering. She also offers is offering a sin offering.
What's the sin?
Yeah, so the question is, why is she offering a sin offering over here? And we've talked about that before. Let's look now. I mean, there's Rav Shimshon Farl Hirsch has an explanation for. Let's first look to Rabbi Hirsch because he's oft quoted. Okay, I'm going to share screen. My problem is every time I try to look at Orthodox Union, it goes to their app. Let's see what happens here. Might work. Okay. So it says, welcome to a new feature, questions and answers about the weekly parsha that will open up the text with questions and various approaches. This material is excerpted from Rabbi Shmuel Golden's new book, Unlocking the Torah Text, an in-depth journey, which, by the way, a friend of mine has this, and he really likes it. And the stuff that he shared with me has been pretty interesting. This book by Rabbi Shmuel Golden. It's not new anymore. It's from anyways, it does seem like a really interesting book. Anyways, Parshas Tazria opens with one of the strangest examples of biblical ritual impurity, Tumat Yoledet, the Tuma resulting from childbirth. The Torah relates that following the birth of a male child, a childbearing mother enters a 7-day period of Tuma, which, again, often translated as impurity, but that's a word that just doesn't do the full job. while following the birth of a female child, a 14-day period of Tuma is mandated. In each case, these days of Tuma are then followed by much lengthier periods, 33 days for the birth of a male, 66 days of the birth of a female, of modified separation from sanctified objects. Finally, at the close of each extended period, the mother brings a burnt offering and a sin offering to the temple to mark her full reentry into society. Questions. Bearing a child is clearly one of the most highly sanctified acts possible. The first divine blessing commandment giving to man while still in the Garden of Eden, the clearest demonstration of man's partnership with God. Why then does a woman automatically incur a state of tuma as a result of childbirth? What is the significance of the different separation periods mandated in response to the birth of a male and female child respectively? Aren't all children of equal value? And finally, the most problematically, what is the significance of the korbanot brought by a yoledet, a childbearing mother? In particular, why does the Torah instruct a woman to bring a sin offering in the aftermath of childbirth? What possible sin could be associated with the glorious act of bringing new life into the world? Approaches. A. The most basic and in some ways most problematic approach to the perplexing issues surrounding Tumat Yoledet is offered by a group of scholars, including Rabbeinu Bachya and the Kli Yakar. So Rabbeinu Bachya, there are two Rabbeinu Bachyas. One is Rabbeinu Bachya ibn Pekuda, all right, so let's just look these two just to get our bearings here. So our Rabbeinu Bachya is called Bachya ben Asher ibn Halawa. He was a rabbi and scholar and best known as a commentator of the Hebrew Bible. He was one of two scholars now referred to as Rabbeinu Bachya, the other being the philosopher Bachya ibn Pekuda. Bachya ibn Pekuda lived 1050 to 1120. So the duties of the heart, that's Bachya, Rabbeinu Bachya ibn Pekuda. This Rabbeinu Bachya was amongst the Spanish scholars, and his stuff, he's like in the orbit of the Ramban, Nachmanides. Okay. So anyways, that's this Rabbeinu Bachya he's talking about. And the Kli Yakar, actually from Prague, but he's like in the, I'm going to say the 1600s. His name is Shlomo Ephraim Lunchitz, and he was 1550 to 1619. And he lived in Prague. From 1604 to 1619. All right, so this answer A is primarily proposed by these two, but others as well. These commentaries view both the tuma resulting from childbirth and the sin offering in its aftermath as a reflection of the primal sin of Chava, the first woman. In response to Chava's role in the consumption of the forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, God condemns her and female progeny to the travails of childbirth. While giving birth to a child is therefore a glorious mitzvah, the pain and difficulty associated with the process is the product of sin. This approach, however, gives rise to serious issues concerning the nature of divine reward and punishment. As we have seen before, Judaism clearly rejects the Christian notion of original sin. We are not guilty in perpetuity of the sin committed by Adam and Chava. On this issue, the Torah is clear. Fathers shall not die because of their children, nor shall children die because of their fathers. The individual will die in his own sin. We are each held culpable only for our own failings and not for the failings of others, past, present, and future. How then can these scholars suggest that each childbearing woman across history must somehow atone for a crime committed by her ancestor at the beginning of time? Now, notice that we are not quoting the Gemara here. We're not quoting a midrash here. We're quoting commentaries. The dates of these commentaries are like so far like the 13 to 1600s. They're very important commentaries, but in the hierarchy of in a kind of hierarchy of importance of an explanation, it's much more available for disagreement, let's just say that. In the area that they find themselves, which we would call early Achronim, people of what we would call the post-Rishonim, post-first commentaries section, the post-medieval commentaries. So their opinions are very important, but they're very available for disagreement. The key to understand this approach may well lie in a distinction that we have noted previously. While Judaism absolutely rejects the Christian concept of original sin, we cannot deny the reality of intergenerational reverberation. We're not responsible in any way for the transgression committed by Adam and Chava at the beginning of time. We are, however, affected by the sin's ramifications. This is not a punishment, but a reality of life. Had Adam and Chava not sinned, we would now be living a very different existence in the Garden of Eden. The problem is that it's called a sin offering. So that makes it sound like you're somehow atoning for sin. Similarly, we're all concretely connected to each other across generations. Such overarching life issues as where we're born, to whom, into what environment, and in fact, whether or not we're born at all, are determined not only by God, but also by our parents and by those who came before them as well. Even more importantly, our decisions and actions today will critically affect the lives of our children and their progeny tomorrow. At the decisive moment of childbirth, therefore, the Torah graphically reminds the new parents through a series of rituals of the phenomenon of intergenerational reverberation. The mother's state of tuma, her consequent period of physical separation from her husband, the offerings she brings in the aftermath of these events, all result from actions committed by her primal ancestor millennia earlier. The Torah's message could not be clearer. We are each particularly a product of what comes before. How careful then must new parents be with their own continuing decisions and actions, for those very decisions and actions will help shape the lives of generations to come. So that is how you would explain the Kli Yakar and Rabbeinu Bachya, suggesting that the impurity, the Tuma and the sin offering are the result of the sin of Chava. What he would say is, you're not really atoning for sin in the sense that you're not responsible for the sins of others, but you are a product of a world which is shaped by the sins of others, what they call intergenerational reverberations. B, an entirely different approach is suggested by Rav Shimshon Fall Hirsch. This scholar notes that the Torah sets the stage for the passage describing Tuma Yoledet with the unusual phrase, Isha ki tazria, when a woman yields seed. By choosing the verb lizroa, to yield seed, and describing human conception, as opposed to the usual biblical term litor, to conceive, the Torah stresses the universal physical character of childbirth. This verb is used on only one other occasion in the text in conjunction with the creation of the earth's vegetation, which is described as Mazria Zera Laminehu, yielding seed to its kind. The highest and noblest occupation, says Hirsch, on which the whole future of the human race is built, is of purely physical nature. Man originates, grows, and exists like a plant. At the moment of childbirth, the childbearing mother involved in the most sublime procedure of her earthly calling, is forced to painfully submit to the laws of nature. As her child enters the world, she becomes one with all other creatures of creation, governed by processes beyond her control. So she experiences viscerally that she is a physical entity that is governed by natural laws. Tellingly, the Torah specifically chooses this moment, the moment when the new soul's arrival into the world is bounded by natural law, to underscore man's unique ability to transcend that law. After childbirth, the childbearing mother confronts an immediate challenge. By deciding to follow Torah law, she embarks upon a conscious journey from Tehuma to Tahara. Step by step, she's guided past the physical constraints of natural law toward a renewed awareness of her own spiritual potential. Her freely chosen journey towards complete religious involvement reminds all that man, once born, is a morally free agent. So by following the ritual that is set out for her after childbirth, she takes the journey from a natural being to a spiritual being. Why does that specifically involve tuma and sin offering? It could be that they are related to the failings, what we'll call the failings of the natural world, that the natural world itself it cannot produce of its own some purity and a righteous existence. The natural world is itself limited, and so the natural world itself here is being characterized or symbolized by tuma and sin offerings, not because, again, she's done anything wrong, but just because this is the challenge for a woman after giving birth, that for some reason she is very much put into the throes of her physicality, and she needs to have some time to come back from it. It would be interesting to compare this to an illness. Like, let's say somebody has a bad case of the flu. So you really do feel like you're suddenly in shackles. When you have the flu, you're sort of surprised by what a physical being you are and how limited is your physical life. And by the grace of God, you continue to exist. That's how you can feel at some moments when you have the flu. And so when you recover, you're perhaps not in a much different space than the woman after childbirth. I don't mean to compare this. As a man, I do not mean to say that I understand childbirth. I'm just saying, the way it's explained, that it sounds like you might be in a similar kind of place, that part of your job is to regain your comfort in your spiritual self, and to allow for your spiritual self to once again find its place in the wholeness of your being. In that case, you're not being commanded for some reason to go through this process, but it could be that her going through this is a model for us, that we're supposed to recognize the path back. I certainly feel this way after I'm sick. Like I had the flu, or also with jet lag, having jet lag. At first, I feel like I have like a kind of repeated experience where I am this physical being, very flawed and very vulnerable. And slowly my spirit is re-energizing and re-emerging. But it takes a little bit for it to reoccupy its place and once again be in charge of the wholeness of my person. take a few days. Okay, so that's B. That's answer B, or answer number 2. And now C. An additional perspective on Tumat Yoledet can be suggested based upon our prior observation concerning the general theme of Tuma, see Tazria Torah. The state of Tuma often seems to occur in response to an individual's encounter with a profound event or experience. God does not want us to pass through life unaffected by what crosses our path. By mandating a ritually limited state following such encounters, the Torah created a forced response. The period of Tuma teaches us that something has changed, that we must be responsible to all experiences that touch our lives. Few events are as potentially life-altering as childbirth. The Torah therefore establishes a period of Tuma to encourage the mother to assimilate the many complex truths with which she comes face to face, from the reality of our own mortality to her sublime partnership with God's creation, and finally to the responsibility she now bears towards her newborn child. The childbearing mother's world has changed forever. The Torah insists that she recognizes this fact. It is also sort of interesting that, let's say initially with the boy, it's a 7-day period. With Nida, we typically speak of a 7-day period. We also speak of Shiva, the morning after coming in contact with the dead. That first intense period of mourning, we speak of it as Shiva, as 7 days as well. They are all, according to this explanation, an opportunity to acknowledge an encounter with a very profound experience, and maybe to have a period where you can assimilate the experience into your life, and that could take a little bit. You have to like step back. So I thought this is pretty good. And again, I had heard that this book is very good, this Rabbi Golden book, reliably good. And here that was really good. That was a good thing here. Gil Student is the one who puts this together. He also is reliably thoughtful and interesting. I'm just going to save this for a second before we go back. Okay, so that's just a sampling of what's out there when it comes to the sin offering. Again, each one has to come up with a kind of broader understanding of why it's called chet, you know. Like in the first explanation where they're relating it to the chet of Adam and Chava, so you understand why it would be a sin offering. In explanation 2 and 3, with the 2 one being the Rav Shimshon Fall Hirsch one about having to sort of navigate the natural world, you have to suggest that chet is not literally attached to sin, but maybe kind of a representative of the condition of the natural world. There's Rashi quotes a midrash. The midrash is on day 3 of creation, where the midrash says that God asked the earth to bring forth fruit trees bearing fruit. And then it says that the earth brought forth trees bearing fruit. So the midrash says that the earth sinned because God asked the earth to bring forth fruit trees bearing fruit, and it only brought forth trees bearing fruit. What's the difference between fruit trees bearing fruit and trees bearing fruit? Fruit trees bearing fruit, according to the Midrash, means that the tree and the fruit taste the same, that the tree itself is fruit, as it were. So the tree itself is fruit and it's bearing fruit, but it doesn't. It brings forth just trees that bear fruit. So the Midrash says that the earth sinned. So, and again, Rashi quotes this Midrash. The Maharal of Prague, in his commentary on Rashi, explains this Midrash to mean that the earth, what God was asking of the earth was that the earth provide both the tree and the fruit immediately. What does that mean? Regularly, what happens with a tree is you plant a tree, and after a few years, the tree starts to bear fruit. But there's work, hard work, that is built on trust that there is a trust that eventually there's going to be fruit. So you're putting in a couple of years of hard work without seeing the fruit, just because you know that later on there's going to be a fruit. This is symbolic of man's creativity in the world. Initially, even the human being themselves, the human being has to be nurtured and taken care of before it starts to provide fruit. So let's say we think of fruit as biological. So human beings tend to have children, let's say in their 20s. So if you're looking for productivity, biological productivity, that means that parents and family and friends are putting in all this work for the first 20-something years of nurturing this person, so that eventually the person will be fruitful, but it's going to be like 20-something years. If you think of our productivity as being the work of our hands, which is another kind of creativity that human beings are engaged with, so that kind of creativity also maybe, nowadays it also seems to be around the 20s where people start to really bear fruit. I mean, some people do it earlier, but for the most part, your 20s is when you start to bear fruit then too. So if you look at the human being as a kind of a tree, so there's a lot of work put in before the fruit shows itself. But this is also true of our productivity as well. We as human beings are biologically creative and then are creative with our hands, and all that being symbolic, because sometimes we're creative with our minds and with our words. But our creativity tends to be like that you work and you only see the product of your work later on. Also, when you're acting in the world, you don't always see, you see the action that you take, but you don't necessarily see the effect of that action till later. So a person could put out some kind of goodness in the world, but you don't necessarily see that goodness reflected right away. It could be like planting a seed or tending to a tree. It could take years before the goodness that the person puts out in the world is reflected. And the same thing with the opposite. If somebody puts out something negative into the world, it could be years before somebody sees the negative. That's the nature of this world. In this world, they don't come together. There's not an immediate effect from an action. The productivity is not immediate. It takes time. That's what it means when it says the world brought forth a tree that produces fruit. So it's because it can't do it. It's not the nature of this world to bring a tree that is fruit, which would mean in our metaphors, it would mean that the action and the effect happen immediately. Or let's say somebody smokes and then they get the effect of smoking right away, or somebody drinks, they get the effect of the drinking right away, or somebody is mean to another person and they get the effect of it right away. It's not how it works. It takes time for these things to happen. That allows for free will when it comes to these kinds of things. So it is with, So what does it mean Hashem wanted it this way? So the way he explains it is, in other words, from Hashem's perspective, if we imagining Hashem, which is the best we can do, imagining Hashem, we imagine that from his perspective, it should all come together. In a perfect world, it would all come together. But this world is not capable of doing that. So that's what it means. It used the words that the earth sinned, that the earth sinned. But what it really means is the nature, Earth's nature is missing something. It's missing something. Earth's nature is missing something. So that word for sin can apply to the earth missing something. So I think that's how you'd explain the term chait in that second explanation, where she has to work through nature first in order to get to the place of the spirit. She has to trek back from a place where she just feels totally physical, totally natural, until she gets back to a place where she can sort of recognize her hybrid status as a soul within a body. That would work for the second one. For the third one, where it's a reaction to an event, that one, I don't know how that explanation is going to work with the term sin offering. What is, like, she's had a reaction, a traumatic reaction. You could say it's a combination. It's a reaction that has many layers. She's facing her physicality and her vulnerability. She also lost, there's a loss, while there's a gain of a baby at birth, there's also a loss of the kind of intimate connection she had with the baby while it was in her womb. There could be all sorts of things going on, all of which are very traumatic. Why that offering would be called a sin offering, because of that, would require some more explanation. But that would be that. All right, and then we'll just finish with this. This is going to be about the Mitzvot. We've talked about the Mitzvot before a couple of days ago, and it comes up quite a bit in discussions of offerings, and it goes like this: that he commanded us that someone with tzara'at, with that skin condition, which might be related to psoriasis of some point, offer a sacrifice when he is healed from it. It's he or she, and that is 3 animals: a burnt offering, a sin offering, and a guilt offering, and a log of oil. A log is about a pint. But if he was poor, he should offer a lamb for a guilt offering and 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. And this is the 4th of those lacking atonement, and that is his, may he be exalted, saying, on the 8th day he shall take 2 flawless male lambs and 1-year-old ewe lamb, etc. Okay, so when he says lacking atonement, we mentioned there are 4 in this category, which means they have some kind of impurity and sacrifices as well. So you've got impurity with sacrifices. So even though they resolve the impurity part, they still don't have what we call full atonement until they have brought the offerings. And one will perhaps say, why don't you count the sacrifice of those lacking full atonement as one commandment? Put all of them together: the Nazir, the Zav and Zava, the Yoledet, and the Mitzorah. Those 4. Put those 4 together into one commandment. since they all have one thing that brings them all together, and that is their lack of atonement, such that this would be a certain type of purification. And it would have been appropriate for you to say, it is X commandment that he commanded us that the purity of some impure ones not be complete until they offer a sacrifice. And that is the Zav and Zava, the woman after childbirth, the one with Tzarat. Just like you count purification in a mikvah as one commandment, whatever the specific impurity might be, and you don't concern yourself with the type of impurity with which they were impure, so too would it have been appropriate for you to count the sacrifice of those lacking atonement as one commandment. I don't know why he doesn't use the Nazir here, maybe because there's not necessarily impurity with the Nazir. There is impurity with the Nazir if he comes in contact. Anyways, and we would not be concerned about their specific impurities. So in other words, you've done this before where you've taken a bunch of scenarios and put them in one mitzvah. So why don't you do it here? God knows that this would no doubt have been appropriate if the sacrifice of each one of these four that lack atonement were the same and did not differ. Just like the purification in the mikvah is a specific type of purification for every impure one. However, as a result of the variation of their sacrifices, as you can see, it is perforce required to count each sacrifice individually. For the thing with which one completes their purification is different from the thing which the other one completes it. This is like waters of purification mixed with ashes of the red heifer, the waters of the mikvah, and these four species for the one with Tzarat are 3 commandments, even while they're all to purify the impure, as I will explain. And the regulations of these 4 that lack atonement and the regulation of their sacrifices are, so here he does have Nazir, right? He mentions 4. But when he's talking about then for some reason back here, he didn't mention Nazir. The Zav, the Zava, the woman with childbirth, and the Mitzorah, the Tzarat one. And they didn't mention Nazir. Now he comes back and mentions Nazir. And the regulations of these 4, the lack of atonement, and the regulations of their sacrifice have already been explained, general and in detail, in the 8th chapter of Nazir at the end of Negaim, the tractate of Kinim, and in scattered places in the Talmud. But most of them and their principles are in places we named. See Parshat Mitzorah, Mishnah Torah, offerings of those with incomplete atonement. Okay, we're going to do animal tides next. I look forward to doing that with you guys on Monday. Be'ezrat Hashem. I'm very grateful being able to learn with you today. Be well. And I'll see Estelle and Lois will be on tomorrow together. I look forward to that.
Looking forward. Thank you, Reb.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.